Hey guys, this is Brian Mounts with the Turf Mechanic brand. Today I want to talk a little bit about why I have grass on a hillside behind me. A lot of people think of lawn space as really just kind of the flat area right around your house, kind of your front yard and your backyard. And although I have that here on my property, I'm also starting to grow grass on the hill that you see behind me. And the reason for that is one of the biggest benefits of having turf grass is its ability to hold soil in place, erosion control. Now, when we moved into this property back here, it was basically just a bunch of annual grasses and weeds growing on that hill. In the spring, everything looked pretty amazing, pretty green and lush, and everything would grow big. And then by the summertime, everything would die off, and then it would get trampled down by animals. And this hillside behind me was eroding down the hill to the point where you could see a lot of the rock underneath it, and the soil had started piling up at the backside of this little structure and concrete pad back here. We're talking it had piled up by about a foot before I cleared it off and kind of landscaped the area. Basically what had happened is anytime we had rain or snow melt in any sort of great extent, the hill would slowly start eroding away. Now this particular spot isn't that big of a deal because it just erodes down onto the flat yard area, but not all places do that. Now here's the same exact hill, except for I've moved about 100 to 150 feet to the north. This is where we don't keep turf grass. Now here we've trimmed everything down as a fire break, but as you see, it's just annual grasses. But you put your foot here and everything the dirt just slides away. So all of this can travel down. If we move even further to an area where we don't maintain at all, even for fire break purposes, you can still see that areas that get a lot of water, as all of the water comes down the hill when we get rains and we get snow melt, parts of this area just erode away to the point where all of the rock underneath the ground is exposed. All of this dirt just goes down the hill. Now there's our house over here. I'm going to walk over there and show you what's going on over here. All right, from this vantage point, you can plainly see just how steep this hill is. If there was not vegetation on this hill, then it would erode down enormously. Case in point, right over here. This is an area where, I don't know, it's where the kids walk down. And this is the problem with annual grasses versus turf varieties. As the kids walk down this hill, all of the annual grasses get pulled right out of the ground. Like here's a dead annual grass. It just comes right out. Look at that. Look at that root system. It's just a tiny little taproot. Taproots like that are not going to hold the hill in place. So as the kids come down, all of the dirt comes down. When rain comes down, all of the dirt comes down. We have to actually uncover this a lot of times from stuff that has eroded down the hill. As we walk back here, you're going to find that all of the annual grasses, the things that grow really nice and flush and then die off at the end of the season, they just don't hold the hill in place very well. Everything just comes down. Something like this is going to be hard to grow ground cover on, a perennial ground cover. But if someone were to take the time and the energy to install it, the entire hillside would be far more stable. And currently we have tree root systems holding the main part of the hill in place. But if you try to walk or climb this, you're pulling tons of dirt down constantly. And then to continue on with the same point I've tried to make a couple times here is because they are annual grasses, they can be pulled out of the ground very easily with any amount of foot traffic on it. This little path, this is another path that usually the kids take. They come from up there, they come around, they come up here to get to their tree swing. And here the whole hill is eroding away, and this is not stable at all. As you touch it, it just goes. The whole hill wants to come down because there is not a perennial root structure in the ground. Here under the tree swing, this is something any parent can attest to. Under any sort of swing, if there are not perennial root systems from turfgrass, everything kind of caves in and starts going where you don't want it to go. I mean, just lumps in the ground of just loose dirt. Here's another good example of what water can do to ground that does not have perennial root structures on it. We have a heat pump in our house, and the heat pump discharges water every time the heater or the air conditioner kicks on. So this entire channel has been eroded away by little bits of water that get discharged throughout the season. Now, a ton of flowing water like that would still be hard on a ground system covered in turfgrass, but the entire floodplain, I'll call it, would still hold up quite a bit better than a system like this, where the only grasses here are annual grasses and weeds for the most part. Now, you can limit erosion on hills by putting retaining walls in, but these things are very expensive to install. Once you get to the point where you just can't afford to keep building a retaining wall, then that obviously becomes the problem spot. Nothing is growing here, and if I walk on that, it all comes down. Now, you might be thinking, who cares? Who cares if the dirt is coming down? And I don't know, to some extent you might be right. It's just dirt after all. But the thing is, sediment from dirt is one of the primary, I don't want to call it a pollutant in of itself, but the sediment from dirt is actually one of the primary reasons that chemicals get into the waterways, so storm drains and whatnot. It's the dirt that erodes away from residential areas, commercial areas, industrial areas. It's not the chemical necessarily that washes away. Many of these chemicals bind to the soil particles that, and the silt and whatnot, that is getting washed away from runoff and erosion. And when those chemicals bind to the soil particles and then they travel with the water to wherever it is going, limiting erosion not only keeps your, your physical environment more stable, safe, and aesthetic, but also contributes to limiting chemical runoff into our storm drains, into our waterways. Now, there's this hillside, and like I said, over here I've got dogs in our kennel. This is another area where we don't have grass at all. It's just bare dirt. It's bare dirt because of the dogs. They look lazy now, but they do run around quite a bit. And when they run, they kick up dust into the air and it blows away. And this is what's happening all over the world, really, in agricultural settings. They grow, agricultural places will grow crops, and then when the crop is mature, they'll cut everything down, and that's why we drive around and we see farms that are just dirt. Now, as that dirt gets blown up into the air, here's the dog. He's going to show us maybe. As that dirt gets blown up into the air, it blows away. And that's why we have topsoil deficiencies in our country and many countries around the world. Topsoils are being blown away because of agricultural practices. Or in this case, in a very micro scale, our dog kennel is contributing to topsoil decay and loss. It just blows away because I don't have perennial ground cover here protecting the topsoil that exists on the lawn. As I move further around to what I call the hill yard, you'll see what all of these yard spaces that I just showed you have the potential to be. So I cultivated this hillside right here, and I put some grass seed down, and it hasn't fully come in yet. And this will give you a good representation because everything here is what eroded down here over the years. After carving into this and landscaping it, all of the dirt here was very, very loose. If you stepped on it, the dirt would go everywhere. Over here, look how steep this is. That's a steep hill. In only 2 months, I can just dance around on this and the soil holds together. If we come over here, this is another section of the yard that I cultivated, and I put perennial grass seed on. This is buffalo grass. This ground is stable. Like, nothing is going to make the dirt go anywhere. But if I go over here onto the area where the turf grass has not come in yet, so you can see seed on the ground right there. If I were to step here, everything moves very easily. I don't want to step too hard, otherwise I'm going to disrupt everything. There's another example over here. Oh shoot, look at that. I just moved everything around by stepping there. It's the root structure of these perennial grasses that hold soil in place. Here's an example of deer stepping on an area where the grasses haven't fully come in. It just moves. Look at that, I just did that. I just damaged my baby grass. What I'm getting at here is the more perennial root structures that you have in the ground, which are very easy to achieve with turf grass, are going to hold soils in place and limit erosion, especially where there are heavy water flows or wind. There are some people that don't have hills at all, and that's fine. You might think having bare dirt on flat ground is no big deal, but the thing is, when anything runs across it, dust, topsoil is getting kicked up into the air and lost. And anytime that there's a storm, anytime, the storm runoff will not go into the soil the same way it will when you have turf grass installed. That storm runoff will go out onto the sidewalks, onto the street, take the soil and all of the chemicals with it, and it's going to stick it right back into the water system. Now, erosion control is really just one particular benefit of having turf grass around our lawns and our businesses and our industry. There are plenty of other very important benefits of turf grass, and I've got an entire playlist where I go into many, if not all, of the main benefits. I've got it linked right up here. Go ahead, take a look at the playlist and take a look at all of the individuals or some of the individual videos that I have in it. I think it will be eye-opening.